But I wanted to start off today's episode doing something that we always leave too long, and that is thanking our patrons and all the donations and the pledges that once again have kept us going and kept us working on this stuff. And I just want to say an especial thanks to those of you who are helping us out in February, because that was a particularly tough month for us in terms of schedules. So I know it was a little more of a gap on a few episodes. So thank you very much. And I'm starting back in February 1st. So again, let me know if I skipped over you and didn't get a chance to say thank you. So starting back in February 3rd, Jason Dodge pledged.
Thank you, Jason.
Nick Kozoma, Reverend Jan Avende, Suda Arzik, Evan Lucas,
Rahela.
You say that again?
Rahela
Udin.
Guessing.
Derek McDowell, thank you very much. That was very generous. Caitlin Mara, Robert Barrett, Soaring Bibliophile. I love that username. That's great.
Thank you so much, guys.
Jacob Annette, Eric Cruz, Brendan Clark, Gwyneth Waters, Analis Amaro, up to his pledge, Antonia Stark, Simon Aylett, Kaylee Hayward, Kelsey Baldwin, up their pledge, Nikki McKenna, Thomas Burke, Christopher Pruchnick, Matthew Wilmot. And that gets us through February.
That is only February.
That is only February, guys. It's just fantastic.
We can't thank you enough. And I think in the month of March, we reached 300 patrons for the first time. It's pretty exciting.
That's right. Yeah. So that was a big landmark for us to hit, having 300 people donating. Super, super excited about that. So starting in March 1st, Thomas Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller.
Astrid Jeff up to her pledge. Thank you, Astrid. And we are also hopefully going to be working with her on an ad coming up fairly soon.
Oh, yeah. That's great. I'm feeling for you with this one coming up.
Yeah.
Apologize to you fine Northern European folk. We cannot speak your language. We're very bad at it. Or languages, I should say.
Mladen Drobnik. Wow.
It's a lot of consonants.
Drobnikovic.
Mladen Drobnikovic. Something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mladen. We appreciate you.
DK, the letters DK. Stephanie Fuqua, up their pledge. Dean Carlisle pledged. Chris pledged.
Just Chris.
Arlene pledged. Just Chris and just Arlene. Evans Lineweaver. Jen Cobb. Jesse Schultz. Ole Martin Oldervik.
Ole Martin.
Thanks, Ole Martin. Jeffrey Wright. Starman. I like that. That's nice.
Starman.
Linda Wegg. Oh, the Black Tower pledge. Thanks, the Black Tower.
Thanks, Black Tower
Gotta
podcast.
show that. Yeah, support that other podcast. Avery Bruni. Double pits to chesty. That's.
They just wanted to make you say that.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Isn't that how you put on Axe body spray? Double pits to chesty. Wasn't that like their ad, part of their ad commercial?
I don't know.
Who knows? Some bloke. Apparently, some bloke decided to donate.
Some bloke
thank you,
out
some
there
bloke.
Is donating.
Yeah, some bloke out there. Gilad S. Thank you. Justin Smallwood. Excellent. And Dan Styling.
Thanks again so much, all of you who've donated in the last 2 months. We tried to just read all those out. I feel like I should say once again, if we have missed any of the names, which does occasionally happen, just shoot us an email and be like, hey, you jerks, you forgot us. Read this name, and we will. We appreciate every single one of you. And, yeah, like Seth was saying, that is really what keeps us going. Knowing that there's 300 people who are volunteering to send us monies for us to just keep going means so much. 300 human beings that, most of whom we've never met.
It's remarkable. And I always say I can massage the download numbers to mean a lot of different things. hard to massage the money. The money's one of those numbers that's like, yeah, it shows us more than anything else that you guys care about what we're doing. And you're not just indulging us.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. Sitting down to discuss Chapter 45, The Tinker's Sword, and our symbol is the Whitecloak Sunburst. Galloping through the village with Faile at his heels, Perrin found the men on the south side in a cluster, peering out over the cleared fields and muttering, some with bows half drawn. 2 wagons blocked the gap the old road made in the sharp stakes. The nearest low stone fence still standing, bordering a field of tabac, lay 500 paces off, with nothing between taller than barley stubble. The ground short of it sprouted arrows like weeds. Smoke curled up in the far distance, a dozen or more thick black plumes, some wide enough to be fields burning. Sen Buey was there, and Harry and Darrell Coplin. Billy Conger had an arm around the shoulders of his cousin Whit, Daisy's bony husband, who looked as if he wished Billy would not breathe on him. None smelled of fear, only excitement, and Billy of ale. At least 10 men at once tried to tell him what had happened. Some were louder than others. "The Trollocs tried us here as well," Harry Coplin shouted, "but we showed them, didn't we?" There were murmurs of agreement, but just as many or more eyed each other doubtfully and shifted their feet. "We've some heroes here, too," Darrell said in a loud, rough voice. "Your lot up at the wood aren't the only ones." A bigger man than his brother, he had the same weasel, narrow Coplin face, the same tight mouth as if he had just bitten a green persimmon. When he thought Perrin was not looking, he shot him a spiteful look. It did not necessarily mean he really wished he had been up facing the Westwood. Darrell and Harry and most of their relatives usually found a way to see themselves being cheated, whatever the situation. "This calls for a drink," old Billy announced, then scowled in disappointment when no one echoed him.
I feel that man deeply.
A head lifted above the distant wall and hurriedly ducked back down, but not before Perrin saw a brilliant yellow coat. "Not Trollocs," he growled disgustedly. "Tinkers! You were shooting at Tuatha on. Get those wagons out of the way." Standing in his stirrups, he cupped his hands to his mouth. "You can come on," he shouted. "It's all right. No one will hurt you. I said move those wagons." He snapped at the men staring around him. "Taking Tinkers for Trollocs, and go fetch your arrows. You'll have a real need for them sooner or later." Slowly, some moved to obey, and he shouted again. "No one will harm you. It's all right. Come on." The wagons rolled to either side with the creak of axles that needed grease. A few brightly garbed Tuatha climbed over the fence, and then a few more, and started toward the village in a hesitant, footsore half-run, seeming almost as afraid of what lay ahead as whatever lay behind. They huddled together at the sight of men dashing out from the village, balancing on the edge of turning back even when 2 Revers folk trotted by, looking at them curiously, to begin pulling arrows out of the dirt. Yet they did stumble on.
What a bunch of douchebags firing at Tuatha. You know they didn't accidentally mistake them for Trollocs. They just saw something moving and were like, well, we want to shoot something too.
Right? I thought it was weird. It's so strange because, first of all, there's no excuse. You know the difference between a human wagon and a goddamn Trolloc. They've seen them. Like, there's no way around that anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be different if this was a couple of years ago and they didn't know what they were looking at. But they just, yeah.
I almost want to call it willful ignorance. They're like, by deliberately like, well, we thought they were Trollocs. Well, then you get to fire your gun at it, don't you? You know, or your bow or whatever. Like, that's, you know, it's like, stand your ground, man. Stand your ground.
Just shooting at anything that moves.
Right. I was scared. No, well, you know, that's not an excuse to shoot at someone who's not threatening you. It's just not. So anyway, I really, you know, this is just examples of why the Coplins, the Congars suck. But I
yeah, and those 2 families are very much supposed to represent the kind of worse qualities that people are usually referencing when we're talking about backwater people who are ignorant, and they're supposed to, I think, kind of embody all of the bad qualities.
I think of it as the Shadar Logoth evil, the lazy selfishness that causes, people who aren't necessarily bad to cause bad things to happen.
Evil succeeds while good men do nothing. Thank you, Obi Thunder. Something like that. Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. Evil succeeds if good men do nothing. And so that's sort of the idea to me, that these are just lazy. They just want to keep the Tuatha out. They don't want to deal with anybody. They're just selfish. So, and that's what causes a certain kind of evil. And as we see, because Harry's like, they're thieves, and they're like, Harry, so are you, and you take the nails too. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, but
it's like, they'll take anything we don't nail down. And then somebody else from the crowd yells, yeah, but if we nail it all down, you'll steal the nails too. Even you're worse than them.
Exactly. And that's true. Again, trying not to get too much into politics, but often immigrant populations have less crime than native populations because they're trying to have a successful life and live by the rules.
They know they're under tougher scrutiny than everybody else. So
exactly.
Well,
you have less opportunities in a lot of ways to break the law.
But this is a group of Tuatha that they've already been attacked.
And this, we should talk a little bit about this group, because this is the group that took Perrin in back in Eye of the World.
Yep. This is Rain and Ela's group of Tuatha.
And so we've got Aram, who dances with Egwene, and we've got that whole history there, and Ela, and all that kind of stuff. So they're sort of representatives of all the Tuatha in some ways, but they're the group we keep encountering over and over and over again.
Yeah, they're the ones that we really see. And for those of you that remember, this is a fairly big group that we ran into in the Eye of the World, and Perrin counts somewhere around 20 men and women, with some small children and elderly with them. So it's a really small group that is left over after the Trolloc attack that happened. Is it last night?
Yeah. And I think it was Fane's Trollocs as well.
Oh, almost definitely.
Yeah.
And we see that, partly established, at least in a little bit. This group is just running towards Emonds Field, which is really weird for Tinkers. They don't normally go in towns because they don't know what else to do.
And we saw in the previous chapter that Perrin offered them sanctuary, and they were like, oh no, why would we ever do that? That's towns are terrifying. And as you saw here...
it's even more terrifying, though? Not towns.
Not towns.
Yeah.
As it turns out, being slaughtered by Trollocs sucks. But, they have a point. They approached the town, and, they shot arrows at them. So, without Perrin there...
Oh, yeah. Being boiled alive isn't any fun. Perrin shames the group when they start saying, well, they might not have been Trollocs, but they're Tinkers. That's almost as bad. And Perrin's like, you idiots. And he's, yelling at them, scolding them, essentially saying, you would send these little babies out to be eaten by Trollocs. Is that what you're saying?
And I love the way they turn on each other and be like, that's not what I'm saying, that's what he's saying. And then, that's not what we're saying, that's what they're saying. And it's this back and forth of well, fine, we're going to let him in before you do. Don't you dare stop us. And it's one comment by Perrin, and both of them are like, oh, yeah, well, totally, we're on your side. And it's the other guy who's arguing against bringing the children in. If they had just gotten out of the way, we totally would have brought the children in. Totally.
Of course.
I mean, it's a little Taviran-esque. Everyone changes their mind right away. But it's also, Perrin being a good leader.
Yeah. Perrin kind of smooths over that situation. Mm-hmm. Some of the women's circle starts getting the Tuatha situated, saying, every house in the whole village is crowded, but we'll still find a place for everyone. We'll do whatever we have to do.
This is the beginning of the construction boom in the Two Rivers, because they start getting the Tuatha in, and they're going to have to build more places for them, and then all of a sudden people start come flooding over the mountains.
Yeah.
That's going to happen soon.
And I noted that really a lot in this chapter, that big boom is about to happen, because over the next 3 or 4 pages, as we're about to roll into that section, we see a group of basically the community leaders. So the first one's Harold Luhan, and let's see, I think another one is Buell Dowtree, the Fletcher, and the town cooper, and all these different Mr. Salkar. So all these different community leaders are coming to Perrin now and asking him permission before they go through with their plans or whatever, or for help.
Right.
You know? And this is like the beginning of the organization. So like he finds Buell Dowtree, the Fletcher, a ton of little apprentices, and he essentially gets Master Luhan like a front desk clerk.
Right.
to be like,
he's creating a bureaucracy almost.
Yeah. The blacksmith
And
is working
one
right now.
which-
You can leave a message.
Exactly. He's hammering these people together into a working whole. And that's really what his job is at this point, is to bring these people together. And he's becoming a leader rather than just a general. Because he's just been fighting out in the wilderness. But now he's actually like, okay, everyone get together, organize, listen to me. This is what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And even though he's not like necessarily making up the answers, he's like saying, hey, what do you think we should do? And then they tell him, and he's like, okay, then that's what we're doing. But once he puts a stamp of approval on it, that's what everybody gets behind.
Right.
And that's really the strength in having a leader, is he's the one who's able to make a final decision that everyone can back up.
And I feel like that's really highlighted that the people are accepting Perrin as a leader when this Mistress Alcar, it's a surname I recognize. I can't remember if there are any important characters that are Alcars, but the point is it looks like she maybe kind of ran the equivalent to like Emonds Field daycare, or like,
right,
school for the smallest children. And she comes to him and says, is it okay if the kids play over here or there? And Perrin's like, why are you asking me? Like, you've been doing this since I was a little kid. Just do whatever you would do. You
right,
know
right.
how to do your job. Just go do it.
Take care of yeah. But she wants to make sure, like, I don't want the field, what if the field's used for, like, military practice or something like that? Like,
yeah.
Let's not have the children on the other end of bows.
And he's like, you would know what to do better than I do, so just do that. And her response is like, well, of course I know more than you do, but I just wanted to make sure it's done the way you want it done. And Perrin can't understand this,
And it's his eternal struggle with leadership, is like he just doesn't understand why him, and why everyone's decided to make him a leader, and he's like, I don't get it, but they need someone to be a leader.
Yeah, and when you have a good leader, people want to make sure that they're in line to some degree with what everyone else is doing. Right. You don't want to be the odd man out that doesn't understand what's going on.
And everyone sees him as a good leader, whereas he's like, well, I'm just pointing out common sense. And someone's like, yeah, that's what we want in a leader, someone who points out common sense. Like, he's like, but you know what common sense is. And they're like, why do you not get this?
It's like, you were my preschool teacher. You taught me common sense. Why are you asking?
Right, exactly. But it's one of the I say trifecta of frustrations that people have with Perrin.
Yeah, it takes him a while.
His inability to accept leadership for a very, very, very long time. So yeah, I don't have a lot of notes on that thing until there's just like this series of people who come up to him and then he helps them out. Like it's interesting and fun to read, but I don't have a lot of notes on it other than like what we already talked about.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I wanted to say about the last 3 pages. I have a bit of reading marked for a little after Perrin gets to the inn, when Mr. Salvier is feeding him and Faile appears. Aram's sitting there with Matt's sisters.
Yeah.
Who have really taken a liking to the pretty Aram.
Yeah, so there was just quick thing. Lord Luke shows up and he brings Myrddraal's eyeless head. And I wanted to point out, I think that Myrddraal was killed for failing to kill Perrin.
Oh, I like that. I forgot that he shows up for a second and drops off the head of a Myrddraal, and
yeah, he just shows up and like drops a Myrddraal head in the middle of the table and like leaves because he's a dick. But I think all of the Myrddraals that he's killing are the ones who have failed him. It's basically like
right, or maybe they're.
It's not that he's going out hunting them. He's like killing the ones who are like against him, or they're Fanes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
That could be it as well.
He could be hunting Fanes, Myrddraal, the ones who have turned.
And something is happening there, and I'm not exactly sure, but because when the Whitecloaks do show up later, Luke talks to Bornhald a little bit, and he's like, was that Ordeith there during the attack on Terran Ferry? He just seems very real there for those couple of bits of dialogue. Luke sounds actually interested.
Yeah, because his whole purpose is to hunt down Ordeith. That's why he's there.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to point out, here's where Tam tells the boys about the companions of Ilion.
Yeah, and now they want to be companions.
And he's like, why would Tam tell them about it? And that's because we know that Tam was in the companions. He's a retired member. Yeah. Which is not something you get from this little sentence, but it's totally like, yeah, that's something. And then they end up taking the name the Wolf Guard, not the companions, but they sort of are the same thing.
Yeah, I'll read this little bit because I feel like this is kind of encapsulates what is happening in the Two Rivers and what will happen. Just this little conversation about, well, I'll read it, and then you'll know. Mistress Elvire said you had finally gotten tired of your saddle, Faile said, popping in through the door to the kitchen. Startlingly, she wore a long white apron like Marin's. Her sleeves were pushed up above her elbows, and she had flour on her hands. As if just realizing it, she whipped the apron off, wiping her hands hastily, and laid it across the back of a chair. I've never baked anything before, she said, shoving her sleeves down as she joined him. It is rather fun kneading dough. I might need to do it again someday. If you don't bake, he said, where are we going to get bread? I don't intend to spend my whole life traveling, buying meals or eating what I can snare or fetch with a bow or a sling. She smiled as if he had said something very pleasing, though he could not for the life of him see what. The cook will bake, of course. One of her helpers, really, I suppose, but the cook will oversee it. The cook, he mumbled, shaking his head. Or one of her helpers. Of course. Why didn't I think of that? It's like that. What's the matter, Perrin? You look worried. I don't think the defenses could be any sounder without a fortress wall. It isn't that, Faile. This Perrin Golden Eyes business is getting out of hand. I do not know who they think I am, but they keep asking me what to do. Asking if it's all right, when they already know what has to be done, when they could figure it out without 2 minutes' thought. For a long moment, she studied his face, those dark tilted eyes thoughtful, then said, How many years has it been since the Queen of Andor ruled here in fact? The Queen of Andor? I don't really know. 100 years, maybe? 200? What does that have to do with anything? These people do not remember how to deal with a queen, or a king. They're trying to puzzle it out. You must be patient with them. A king, he said weakly. He let his head drop down onto his arms on the table. Oh, light. Laughing softly, Faile ruffled his hair.
Yeah, a lot of little drops of clues about her being a noblewoman in there.
Faile's...
She's prepping him to be king and her to be queen.
Yeah, and I think doing what she can to angle him into... And later she says, I doubt very much that Morghese would approve of him being a king, that is, a leader at least, but she would very definitely approve of a man who brought lands back to her that her throne is not controlled in 100 years or more. She would surely make that man a lord. Perrin of House Ibara, Lord of the Two Rivers. It has a good sound.
Just don't raise the banner of Manetheren, because then you're in rebellion.
That does upset her, yeah.
Yeah. He does get that taken down.
And I just love, right off, Perrin's response is... We do not need any lords in the Two Rivers, he growled, at the oak tabletop, or kings or queens. We're free men. Free men can have a need to follow someone too, she said gently. I'll leave it there, but this is kind of the genesis of the Wolf King, in the most legal, literal sense.
The king of the Two Rivers, basically.
Yeah.
And so, meanwhile, there was a couple little lines about Aram in there. When he's sitting with Bode and Eldwin, Matt's sisters, he's like, he hardly swallowed without running a wide-eyed gaze over the spears and polearms against the wall. For Tuathalan, it had to be a horrible sight. But we know he's considering picking them up, because here in a second,
right,
Aram's slow wandering him took him around the room 3 times before he stopped at the foot of the stairs, staring at the barrel of ill-assorted swords. Then he reached out and pulled a sword from the cluster, hefting it awkwardly. The leather-wrapped hilt was long enough for both of his hands. Can I use this one, he asked. Love that. Tuathalan with the sword. And that's the fulfillment of Min's vision as a major turning point in Perrin's life.
Yeah, I liked that you brought that up a little bit earlier when Matt's sisters, Bode and Eldwin, are sitting there giggling with Aram in between the two of them, and they're like trying to feed him and being whatever cute teenage girls trying to flirt with this boy who is only staring at the weapons on the walls, who, by the way, watched a lot of his family be murdered last night. So he's like, it makes sense that he's not really interested in the girls. They're not.
He's in shock, yeah.
Yeah, they're not catching his attention. He's just kind of eating and looking at the weapons and thinking about his fate.
Totally.
And he also, we see, blames himself that because he did nothing, now his mother's dead. He was like, well, if maybe I had a weapon, I could have done something.
Survivor's guilt, I think.
Oh, yeah. Super common,
They killed Mother. I saw them. I might have saved her if I had a sword. And you see him, like, crying, like, I could have saved her. Like, it's a tough moment. It's a real tough moment.
Can I use this one? He asks to Perrin, and Perrin chokes on his food that he's eating. And then Aram's grandmother, Ela, walks down the stairs and loses her mind when she sees Aram even touching a sword.
No, and all this pain, I mean, Perrin would love to follow the way of the leaf. It's a dream for him to be in a peaceful world, but it's a dream that he can't have. And he's watching the dream fall apart for other people as well. And that's where I think the pain is coming from.
Yeah. Someone just said this in Discord, and I had this thought, Leia said this in Discord, and I had this thought while I was reading it. The Tuathon showing up in the Two Rivers to a heavily embattled Two Rivers, and at least Aram being pulled into like the army and the idea away from the way of the leaf and toward self-defense and violence even really reminded me of the visions that Rand had in the Crystal Columns at Ruidian. Where
I was going to bring that up as well.
Slowly the Aiel, as they're victimized over and over, become or start to disregard the way of the leaf and pick up weapons to defend themselves.
Well, and I have to wonder if perhaps the symbolism of Aram picking up a sword, which is something, an extreme the Aiel never go to.
Yeah.
They say, I do not break the way of the leaf. I've never picked up a sword. And they managed to survive and flourish, whereas Aram did pick up the sword, and I believe that betrayal may be what caused his eventual downfall.
In a sort of untempered embrace of violence.
Right. All he does is train. He has no life. He has no personality. It leaves him open to being brainwashed because he just, basically embraces violence as a philosophy and rage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas the Aiel are more, at least they were there to protect the Gen.
Right. I'm glad you said that because I didn't have that thought, but that's interesting to point out that even those first Aiel to pick up the spear, at least they felt bad about killing people, right? They didn't think it was like the answer. They were just like, we don't know what else to do, or
we can't stand by
hand
anymore.
Was forced. Whereas Aram is in a bit of a different situation, and he's really leaps right into it. He's only had a few hours to think about disregarding his family's way of life that they've been following for thousands of years, and he just throws it away.
No, and then that brings up the third parallel that I think we've talked about, which is Perrin choosing the hammer over the axe, which is the hammer can create, the axe is only there to kill. And that's really important for his journey and his transition and his choice. And so I think that what we're seeing is a bunch of different peoples, Aram, Perrin, and the Aiel people, make the choice of picking up a tool to kill when you have to, versus picking up a tool that can only kill
because you want to.
And that leaves you open to, you fully embrace violence, and it leaves you open to corruption. Right.
Violence isn't the goal. It's defense is the goal, and if violence is necessary, then so be it. There's a big difference,
And we even see Rand talk about that in some of the final books, where he thinks about using the one power and thinks about how he needs to learn how to heal, because for too often he used this gift only to kill. And he needs to readjust what he's doing and actually use a tool for both its good and bad sides. And so it also has all the parallels with the one power, with Rand picking that up. Matt, there's no parallel there. He's just like, there's no bad side. He doesn't have bad luck.
Margot, I really like your comment in Discord that essentially Aram turns to the dark side.
Right.
Where
he follows that path.
Right.
Anger turns to hate. Hate turns to violence. There's fear in there somewhere. Well, fear turns to hate.
Fear turns to anger? Anger turns to hate? Is that right? Help us out, Yoda.
We're Watt fans, not Star Wars fans. Yeah. Or fanatics, I suppose. Because we are Star Wars fans.
Julia would know if I asked her, but she's not here.
I'm going to say, can't you just yell really loud?
I mean, I could, yeah. She's on the other side of the apartment doing work on her computer.
I love the symbolism of the hilt having the brass wolf head on it, and just his dedication to Perrin.
Oh, yeah.
Also,
I wanted to bring
what's
that
with
up
the
too.
wolf? Yeah, the wolf themes that are just going on. They got the banner, they got the wolf head.
Yeah, the wolf head pommeled sword that Aram picks seems like it represents something, but I don't know what. Right? It's not Perrin's fault that.
No, but it
just
does
to
represent his dedication to Perrin. Yeah.
It's maybe more coincidental than I'm trying to make it out to be.
And then just the next thing, the real significant quote I have here is that dream was not for him. I feel like that's really Perrin's line, is to say, like, the dream of peace is gone. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
And he has to recover that, I think, a little bit.
Perrin feels...
before he can pick up the hammer.
Sad. I'm glad he brought this up, because I actually wanted to read something that this plays right into. Perrin feels sad, and doesn't understand why he does. And like you said, the way of the leaf was a fine belief, like a dream of peace, but like the dream, it could not last where there was violence. He did not know of a place without that. Dream for some other man, some other time, some other age, perhaps. Then he sends Aram off to Tam, and then I wanted to read, conscious of Eldrin's scowl and Marin's fists on her hips and Natty's frown, not to mention Bode's weeping, Perrin walked back to his chair. Alana had gone from her place at the top of the stairs. Faile watched him pick up his knife and fork. You disapprove? He said quietly. A man has a right to defend himself, Faile. Even Aram. No one can make him follow the way of the leaf if he doesn't want to. I do not like to see you in pain, she said very softly. His knife paused in cutting a piece of goose. Pain? That dream was not for him. I'm just tired, he told her, and smiled. He did not think she believed him. I wasn't sure what to say about that, but I felt like it was important.
It is. I mean, it's just their emotional state at this point. I mean, don't forget, Perrin, Aram's family was just killed. Perrin's family, he found out, has been dead for, 10 days?
Right. Yes.
I mean, they've been dead for longer, but he just found out like 10 days ago. So, I mean, there's a certain amount of sympathy and a certain amount of empathy, I feel like, that Perrin is feeling right now. And that Aram's pain is reflecting in Perrin, and Faile is seeing that.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And Perrin wants to live by the way of the leaf as much as anyone. He just doesn't believe that he can. That someone has to do what's necessary, and he's willing to make that sacrifice.
In a world full of Trollocs.
Yeah.
You can't, the way of the leaf is just not an option.
You can't reason with Trollocs.
Yeah. And I think the Trollocs are a stand-in for just bad people as well. Dark friends. The world as it is. It doesn't, I know that specifically Trollocs make it a sort of bright line, but if you compare that to our world, it's still, you have people who do violence no matter what. You can call them Trollocs if you want.
I like that. We should call them Trollocs.
Yeah, we're going from trolls on the internet to Trollocs, the ones who are doing actual damage.
Immediately after that is Bran Alvear walks into the common room and tells Perrin that riders are coming from the north, a lot of them. And we think they're almost definitely Whitecloaks. Thought it was kind of notable that as soon as Perrin's like, oh my gosh, another thing to do, and he starts standing up and Faile's like running already, where she's going to get her horse, she doesn't want Perrin doing any of this alone.
Well, he's, again, just got healed from that massive infection. He still is exhausted from the healing, so he is a hard time even standing up.
That's true.
And so she's like, what are you doing? You need to sit down and rest.
I didn't even think of that. Actually, my thought was that I really see Faile as kind of positioning herself as the queen or the advisor to the king, maybe. She's always there when he's making these important decisions, and she rarely interferes in what he's doing, but she does make sure that she's there.
I mean, she's the first lady, or whatever you want to call her. She's the wife, the queen. She's the not always making the decisions, but there to support him.
And also, I think calling him down a bit when he tries to take on too much for himself.
Sure. Absolutely.
She teaches him a lot about delegation, I think.
While actually doing a lot of the ruling herself.
Yeah.
In the background.
Sit over here, boy. Look pretty. You'll be a great king.
Let people
Let me do the hard work for you.
Yeah. I'll take out Massima, don't worry. You just bring along the army. So we get introduction to Dane Bornhald. Well, another, not so much an introduction, but an encounter between Dane Bornhald and Perrin.
Luke appears basically out of nowhere. Hint, hint. Just as the Whitecloaks show up.
Yeah, where did he appear from?
Dude, he probably materialized out of Teleron Riyadh behind a tree.
I was going to say, had to be Teleron Riyadh.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's exactly what happened.
It's so suspicious.
Luke had appeared from somewhere. Like, how often is Jordan that vague about where someone comes from?
Oh,
Never.
Yeah.
Never. So, it had to have been a gateway or a portal or, something like that.
And as Perrin comes into his powers, like, more and more, he can be like, he knows where you came from and not just that you're there because your boots smell like the dirt or, it's... Yeah.
Right.
He's not... It's pretty hard to surprise him. Not that he's really surprised, but, just wanted to point that out. And Dane Bornhald shows up with, like, it looks like most of the children behind him.
Oh, yeah, it seems like he's got the whole group.
And, of course, he says some very white-cloaky things.
Right. By keeping us out, that proves you're dark friends.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Truly, a village of the shadow, if it is close to the children of the light.
And, of course, Bayar's there, and they get the whole, like, they really fucking hate Perrin because he thinks that Perrin is responsible for his father's death.
Yeah, in this moment, I couldn't remember all the details of this chapter exactly, but Perrin walks out, meets the little group of representatives from the Whitecloaks, and Perrin, Bran Alvear, and I think a couple of the Bannermen walk out to meet the couple of Whitecloaks that come away from their two big groups. And for a moment, I was like, oh, does he totally get away with it in this scene? And then, of course, the Emonds Fielders get all fired up when Bornhald's saying, like, why do you have all these weapons? Why do you need to defend yourself if you walk in the light, blah, blah, blah. And the Emonds Fielders start yelling, like, we killed hundreds of Trollocs just shortly ago. Where were you? Like, yeah. You think you're so high and mighty and fighting for the light. You weren't here when we were killing shadowspawn. And then they start chanting, two rivers, the two rivers, and Perrin, golden eyes, golden eyes, golden eyes. And then the Whitecloaks are like, oh.
We should probably back down.
Then they know who Perrin is.
Because they're bullies. And the second you stand up to a bully, they back down because they don't want to fight someone who can punch back. Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm pointing out is before that they didn't know that Perrin was Perrin. Or I guess Bayar would have to know.
Yeah, Bayar knows who he is, and Bornhald recognizes him as well.
But yeah, so like you said, also that makes the Whitecloaks realize that if you want to charge and you want to take this guy prisoner, you're going to have to attack a well-defended position. Not a good idea to run big horses at stakes planted in the ground. That's what those are there for.
So they deliver the information that Terran Ferry has been basically wiped off the planet.
Right.
Which no one really mentions again. It's like, oh yeah, Terran Ferry, whatever.
And the Emond Fielders are like, good. They were jerks.
So long, suckers. Because they're the ones who like intrabred outside the little community. So they're not pure blood, Manetheren blood anymore.
And they're kind of They're like the worldly people of this unworldly place, if that makes any sense.
Totally. And so when they deliver the news that Terran Ferry was destroyed by Trollocs, Luke immediately perks up and is like, oh, was Ordeith there?
Super suspicious. Because Slayer's like, well, those weren't my Trollocs. So They must have been the other guys.
So that tells us that Ordeith wiped out Terran Ferry.
Do we ever find out why?
I think he was just trying to prevent more traffic in and out.
Could be. Or make noise and attract Rand.
Yeah. And he's Ordeith and he likes to kill.
Yeah, there's that too.
Sweet souls. Sweet, crunchy souls.
And we see that Bornhald hates Ordeith. Slayer hates Ordeith.
And Bornhald doesn't know where he is, which makes me think, yeah, of course he was up there. That was definitely his Trollocs killing those folks.
Bornhald says that he doesn't know where Ordeith was or is, which tells us that he disappeared and then this happened, so...
All signs point to...
Yeah. And then, out of nowhere, Bornhald just basically starts pointing at Perrin. He, turns away from his conversation with Luke, points at Perrin and says, I arrest you as a dark friend. You will be taken to Amador and there tried under the Dome of Truth. And even Bayar stared at his captain in disbelief. It's a direct quote. And of course, Bran Althir is standing there, and he's like, no, you're not arresting anyone. He says, there will be no arrests, Bran said sharply. We have decided that. No more arrests without proof of some crime, and proof we believe. You'll never show me anything to convince me Perrin is a dark friend, so you might as well put your hand down. He's pointing at Perrin. Very bold.
No, I mean, it's this. He's convinced that Perrin is his father's murderer, and nothing you're going to say to him is going to change his mind. And I don't think it's compulsion on him. I think it's just his, stubbornness and the inability to admit that he could ever be wrong. But Bayar's right there, nodding vigorously, being like, oh, yeah, totally, that's what happened.
Yeah.
His arc is an interesting one of redemption towards the end.
Yeah. And I think Bornhald is enraged and just very emotional, and he's just not doing things that make sense. Skimming through here, a lot of the same. They keep demanding that Perrin surrender himself, I guess, to arrest, and Bran's like, nope, that's not happening. And Perrin even has the thought that even if he did surrender himself, would the Emond Fielders listen to him? Would they let him surrender himself, even if he confessed?
So basically Perrin sort of pulls a fast one on him and says, well, if you want me, why don't you just stay right here in Emonds Field and help defend it? Because then you'll know exactly where I am.
Right. And I mean, it's a really good move because at this point we have thousands of armed men or somewhere around there, screaming at each other. And this could this could blow up at any second.
Right. And so he's just trying to get them to work together, and
someone punches somebody, if one arrow flies, this is a huge battle now.
We don't want people killing people. We want people killing Trollocs.
Perrin says that almost exactly. I won't have men fighting men if I can stop it, he told them firmly. We're not going to do the Trollocs' work for them. Faile practically flung his arm away, scowling at Bornhald. She produced a sharpening stone from her pouch and a knife from somewhere, and began honing the blade with a silk-soft whisk. Harry Coplin won't know what to think now, Bran said wryly. Straightening his round helmet, he turned back to the Whitecloaks and planted his spear butt. You have heard his terms, meaning Perrin. Now hear mine. If you come into Emonds Field, you arrest no one without the say-so of the village council, which you will not get, so you arrest no one. You don't go into anybody's house unless you are asked. You make no trouble, and you share in the defense where and when you're asked. And I don't want to so much as smell a dragon's fang. Will you agree? If not, you can ride back as you came. Bayar stared at the round man as if a sheep had reared up on its hind legs and offered to wrestle. Bornhald never took his eyes off Perrin. Done, he said at last. Until the Trolloc threat is gone, done. Wrenching his horse around, he gallops back toward the line of his men, snowy cloak billowing behind him. As the mayor ordered the wagons rolled aside, Perrin realized that Luke was looking at him. The fellow sat slumped easily in his saddle, languorous hand on his sword hilt, blue eyes amused. I thought you would object, Perrin said, the way I hear you've been talking people up against the Whitecloaks. Luke spread his hands smoothly. If these people want Whitecloaks among them, let them have Whitecloaks. But you should be careful, young Golden Eyes. I know something of taking an enemy into your own bosom. His blade goes in quicker when he is close. With a laugh, he pushed his stallion off through the crowd, back into the village. He is right, Faile said, still stropping her knife on the stone. Perhaps this Bornhald will keep his word not to arrest you, but what is to stop one of his men from putting a blade in your back? You should not have done this. I had to, he told her, better than doing the Trollocs work. The Whitecloaks were beginning to ride in, Bornhald and Bayar at their head. Those two glared at him with unabated hatred, and the others, riding by in pairs, cold, hard eyes, in cold, hard faces, swung to regard him as they passed. They did not hate, but they saw a dark friend when they saw him, and Bayar, at least, was capable of anything. He had to do it, but he thought, maybe, it would not be such a bad idea to let Daniel and Dan and the others follow him around the way they wanted to. He was not going to be able to sleep easy without somebody guarding his door. Guards, like some fool lord. At least Faile would be happy. If only he could make them lose that banner somewhere.
I like the foreshadowing of Faile talking about Bornhald putting a blade in your back when he actually puts it in Bayar's back.
Love it.
Are you still dry? Are you,
Oh no,
drinking
I was drinking with you last night.
with me?
Yeah, it ended up, well, while we were recording.
Oh, okay.
It ended up that around when I was dry for about 30 days. It was Julia's birthday, so I was like, F it, I'll have a couple drinks. And I have since then, but still trying to keep it light. Trying to work out every day. Been about 70% successful.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm getting too chubby for my...
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?